Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial by Davies Media Design. My name is Michael Davies, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to scale images up or down with minimal quality loss. I say minimal because a lot of tutorials out there claim to show you how to scale an image up or down without quality loss. That's actually not really possible given how the process works for scaling images up or down. So any video out there really that says it's going to be able to achieve a larger or smaller image without quality loss is really just exaggerating the truth or flat out lying. Anyway, I'm using GIMP version 2.10.6 for this tutorial, which as always is the latest version of GIMP at the time of this tutorial. But of course, before we get into all that, I want to direct you guys over to my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, we have tons of GIMP video and how-to articles on here, so definitely check that out. You can also enroll in our GIMP photo editing course from beginner to pro photo retoucher, which is a bestseller on Udemy. And of course, you could support our channel and help us grow by becoming a patron on Patreon, and you'll get tons of awesome GIMP extras in return. And I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. Alright, so we're going to be covering a ton of concepts in this tutorial, just in terms of image size in general, image resolutions, the difference between your image size on your computer screen versus in a print scenario, like if you were to print this on a piece of paper, and scaling concepts such as interpolation and resampling. So I want to start with the differences between how your image is displayed here on your computer screen versus how your image is going to be displayed in a print environment. And I'm going to demonstrate that through a poster that I designed in my Magdiel Lopez style poster tutorial, which of course I'll link to in the description of this video. But here was that final poster, and this is actually the JPEG form. So I actually have two versions of this. So I have the 2550 by 3300 300 ppi version of this, and I know it's 300 ppi because if I go to image properties, you'll see here we have the size in pixels, and then we also have the print size, and then we have the resolution, which is 300 by 300 ppi. And I'll hit close on this. For those of you who don't know, the resolution is set when you're going to File, New, and you're opening up a new image, and under Advanced Options you choose the X and Y resolution as 300. However, you can also change the PPI by going to Image, Scale Image, and then right here there's X and Y resolution, and this one is set to 300 PPI. And you can actually change the unit of resolution here. So right now it's PPI, you also have pixels per millimeter, pixels per yard, and so on if you have a specific unit that you need for your print job. But I'm just going to exit out of that. So this one over here is the same exact size image, 2550 by 3300, except the PPI is set to 72 pixels per inch. And you can tell that again by going to image properties, and here you'll see the size in pixels is 2550 by 3300 pixels, but the print size is actually much larger. It's 35.42 by 45.83 inches, and the resolution is 72 by 72 pixels per inch. So you'll notice here the print size is actually much larger for this one. And the reason being that when you have a lower resolution but you have the same size in pixels, basically because you have less pixels per inch, these pixels are going to be able to spread out more and cover more area. So if I were to print this, the print quality would be lower overall, but it would be able to cover a larger area. So it would be able to cover a 35 by 45 inch piece of paper or whatever you were printing this on. But in terms of displaying this on the screen or displaying this for web, you'll see that there is no difference here between the 72 pixels per inch version of this and the 300 pixels per inch version. So there's not going to be any difference really on our computer screen, which is why when you're saving this for web, you want to just save this as 72 ppi, because even though it's a lower resolution, nobody's going to be able to tell, and the file size is going to be smaller. Alright, so moving on from that concept, I'm going to come over to my next image here, and this is an image that I took with my camera. And you'll see up here that this image is around 3500 by 5000 pixels, give or take of course. I do have 4 of these open, and these are all the same exact image. And the reason I have 4 different versions of the same image is I'm going to demonstrate different versions of interpolation. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term interpolation, anytime you enlarge or shrink an image down, it's going to cause GIMP to fill in missing pixels or just change the overall structure of the pixels via a method called interpolation. No new detail is added during this process, which is why there is quality loss when it comes to scaling an image. So it's either removing pixels from your image when you're shrinking the image down, or it's adding in brand new pixels in between the existing pixels when you're scaling something up. So anyway, in a nutshell, interpolation is how your image editor figures out how to represent your picture after scaling it up or down. So let me show you how to scale your image. You go to Image, Scale Image. This is always how you scale an image within GIMP. If you use the scale tool over here, you're only scaling the active layer path or selection. So Scale Image is going to scale the entire composition. You'll see here you have your width and height, and you've got a little chain icon here. You want to usually make sure this is locked. So this is unlocked, this is locked. Anytime you have it locked, it's going to keep the original aspect ratio of the image. So that's just going to keep your image from looking stretched or wonky when you resize it. You've also got some units here, so you can scale this based on percent, pixels, inches, millimeters, etc. So you've got a bunch of different types of units there. And then of course you've got your X and Y resolution here. I have this set to 72 right now because I'm only going to be using this for the web. I'm not going to be using this for print. You'll also see an option down here called Quality, and then you have Interpolation. And if you click on this, you have several interpolation types. So this is what I was talking about when it comes to adding or removing pixels in your image. So these are just the various methods that are used to perform that interpolation action and try to preserve quality while you're doing that. These also correspond to the performance of GIMP on your computer. So when you have this set to none, it's going to preserve the least amount of quality in your image when you're scaling up, depending on the situation, of course. But usually this is going to preserve the least amount of quality in your image, so it's going to show the most amount of artifacts. However, it will be the fastest form of scaling, so if you have a very slow computer and you don't have time to sit there and wait for the image to finish scaling up or down, you could set it to this option, so it'll be the lowest quality but the fastest performance on your computer. And as you move up, linear and cubic are just progressively better at preserving the quality in your image, but get progressively slower in terms of performance. And then you get into what I call the next generation of interpolation within GIMP, which is NoHalo and LoHalo. And these two are the best forms of interpolation within GIMP, and that's just sort of a consensus within the GIMP community. The reason why they're called NoHalo and LoHalo, so LoHalo actually came first, and it was created basically to minimize the effects of something called haloing, which happens around text and just other areas of your image when you scale up or down. So the goal of this is to minimize that haloing and to get rid of as many artifacts without losing the sharpness or just overall quality of the image. NoHalo is sort of the next generation of LoHalo. It does the same thing as LoHalo. It gets rid of haloing effects within an image, but it just uses an upgraded technique to try to do a better job cleaning up the image in the same way that LoHalo does. NoHalo is said to be best used when you are not scaling an image down too much, and that's typically below 50% of the original image size. It's also best when scaling images up that do not contain lots of text or pixel art, or when skin tones need to be preserved in the image. So I typically use NoHalo when I'm scaling images up or down because I work with a lot of photos that have models in them or subjects in them, and so typically you're wanting to preserve those skin tones, and I don't typically have a ton of text in my images either. LoHalo, on the other hand, is best used when scaling an image to less than half of its original size, or when scaling images up that contain lots of text, pixel art, or noise and or artifacts. So the best way to minimize quality loss is through the selection of the proper interpolation method based on the type of image that you're trying to scale. And then you can also combine these interpolation methods with the sharpen filter if you really need to. Alright, so now that I've gone through all the boring technical details about scaling and interpolation quality, I'm going to show you guys a few examples here of how this looks based on which one we select. So I'm going to start with none. Keep in mind for this quality setting how quickly this scales this image down. And by the way, I am scaling all of these images here down at first because these are all pretty large images. And then for the scaling up portion, I'm going to use another photo here. So with my interpolation set to none, I'm going to scale this down to 10% of its original size. And if I hit the tab key, that will automatically scale my height as well with the same aspect ratio. And I'll hit scale. So you'll see that scaled very quickly. I didn't speed the video up or anything. And I have my zoom tool selected here. And I've got this set to 12.5% right now. We're going to zoom all the way in on this and then zoom in a bit more. So we'll go with 550% zoom for this image. So you can see it's very pixelated in here. You can't really see a lot of detail going on here. This is as to be expected when scaling an image that was that large down to this small of an image now. But now we're gonna come over to our next image and perform the same thing, but with a different interpolation quality. So go to Image, Scale Image, and I'll choose 10% here and hit the Tab key, set interpolation to linear. So this is slightly better and it should be slightly slower now. And I'll hit Scale. And then I'm just going to change this to 400% and then click one more time to get to 550. So you'll see here, this is not quite as pixelated as our first one. So this is with none. And this is with linear. So it's a little bit smoother here. And one thing to note, these quality settings do use an anti-aliasing feature. That's why this is sort of smooth. So it's trying to smooth out those rough edges of these pixels. So this is without any of that anti-aliasing, and this is with a little bit. And of course it uses a little bit more complicated formula than just anti-aliasing, but that is one of the major features of these interpolation quality settings. So now I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do the same thing, Image, Scale Image, 10%, hit the Tab key, and then I'm going to change interpolation to cubic, and I'll click Scale. And I'll just change this to 400% zoom, and I'll zoom in one more time, so we're at 550. So here we go, we have none, linear, and then there's cubic. So the differences between linear and cubic aren't nearly as noticeable, and really it's hard to tell that there is any difference at all between those two. But again, there is a major difference between no interpolation there. So I'm going to come over here to our fourth image, and I'm going to go to Image, Scale Image, and I'll hit 10, Tab key, set this to NoHalo this time, and hit Scale. So you'll see that one took a little bit longer, and I'm going to use my zoom tool to zoom in a little bit. And let me go to 400, one more click. So here you'll see this is the cubic setting, and here is the NoHalo setting. So it is marginally better. So the final image is a little bit smoother, it looks a little bit nicer. And I'm going to actually open up one more instance of this image. And then I'm going to go to Image, Scale Image, and now I'm going to use the recommended setting here, which is going to be LoHalo, since we are scaling this below 50% of the original size. And I'll hit Scale. And I'll zoom in. We'll go to 400, click one more time. So here you'll see the quality is pretty good on this one. If you compare it to NoHalo, there's really not much of a difference here. And the main difference is there's no text in this photo or artifacts really. So that's where you'll notice a lot of the difference between these two interpolation settings. But you'll see that these two settings are by far the best settings when it comes to the final overall image. So there is NoHalo, and this is with none. So you can see there's a major difference there. I could sharpen this back up after I scaled it down to try to recover some of that original sharpness from the image that we lost during scaling. And of course I could just do that by going to Filters, Enhance, Sharpen. And I can add just a little bit of sharpness to this. I don't want to overdo it because it will introduce a little bit of haloing. But here's a before, here's an after. I'll click OK and hold Control and zoom out a little bit, and now the image looks a little bit sharper. All right, so let's get into scaling images up. So I'm going to come over here to this image first, and what I'll do is I'll scale this up by double the size, and I'm going to do that for all three of these, except I'm not going to go through the cubic and linear for this image. I'm just going to go through the NoHalo and LoHalo compared to none. So let me go to Image, Scale Image, and I'll scale this up to 200% and hit the Tab key. I'm going to hit none as the interpolation quality, and I'll hit Scale. And then I'll use my zoom tool to zoom in here. And I'll just go with 400% for this one. And I'm going to come over here to my next image and do the same thing. So Image, Scale Image, and I'll type 200, hit the Tab key. This time I will use NoHalo and hit Scale. And then I'm going to zoom in until we hit 400% there. And then I'll do the same thing here. So Image, Scale Image, 200%, hit the Tab key, and then change this to LoHalo this time and hit Scale. So you'll see LoHalo and NoHalo took a little bit longer to complete the scaling. So remember, NoHalo is better for when you're scaling images up, especially when they don't have text or artifacts, and also when you're trying to preserve skin tones in images such as this one. So we do have a model, and obviously she's got skin tones here. Let me just zoom in to 400%. So this one is the LoHalo effect here. This one is NoHalo, and this one is none. So the none obviously has a lot of pixelation going on here in the eye, and if I click one more time, you can really see that. And so let me do that here as well. So a lot less pixelation going on here. Everything looks a little bit more tidy in terms of the quality. And if I come over here, the differences are very minute, if you can really see differences at all. So really both the NoHalo and LoHalo options worked for this photo, but I would just stick with NoHalo unless you have text within your photo. So next I'm going to come over here to my other image, which has a bunch of text in it. It's a lot smaller of an image, so this is 165 by 165. This is actually my YouTube channel icon that's been shrunk down for another social media platform. I'm going to come over here to my zoom and just change the zoom to 100 so you guys can see the original quality and the original size. And I'm just going to scale this up to about 5 times its original size. So I'll go to Image, Scale Image. And remember, for the interpolation or the resampling method, what needs to happen here is GIMP needs to basically blow up the size of this composition. And then because that's going to create a bunch of negative space, since there's going to have to be a lot more pixels, it's going to have to fill in those spaces using these resampling methods or the interpolation method. But I'm just going to choose 500 as the width and hit the tab key. And I'm actually going to change the resolution of this down to 72 just to save some space while we do this. And then I'm going to change the quality to none, and I'll hit scale. So now this is 100%. You'll see the edges of my text are really jagged here. The overall quality of this actually doesn't look too bad considering we scaled it up so much. But I'll zoom in here on the text. You guys can see there's just kind of a bit of a mess going on here with all the pixels. It's not smooth at all. And you can definitely tell that this was a smaller image that has now been made a much larger image. So now let me come over here to our other image. This is the same exact image, same exact size. And now I'll go to Image, Scale Image, scale it up to 500%, and just change this to 72 again. This time I'll set the interpolation to NoHalo and click Scale. So you'll see that now there is a lot more smoothing going on. It does kind of make the photo look a little bit blurry. So here is our other image, and let me just zoom out. It looks a little bit more crisp, but it also looks a lot more pixelated. This one looks smoother, but it looks more blurry. So there's definitely trade-offs, and I think in this case, it kind of comes down to preference. And then I'll come over here to our last instance of this photo and go to Image, Scale Image. I'll choose 500 as the width and hit the tab key. Change this to 72. And then I'll change the interpolation quality to LoHalo. And remember, this is the recommended setting whenever you have artifacts in your image or text. And I'll hit Scale. So here's a comparison. Here is with NoHalo and here's with LoHalo. So LoHalo actually has even more smoothing going on here than NoHalo does. So NoHalo still looks a little bit more pixelated in comparison to the LoHalo. But again, there is a bit of a trade-off because you might perceive that as it being blurry. But I do think this looks a little bit better, and it helps to minimize some of the obviousness that this has been scaled up. So this one you can obviously tell was scaled up. It used to be a smaller image, super pixelated. This one looks a little bit better. If you really want to, you can go to Filters, Enhance, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. So here's a before and here's an after. So this will sharpen this up a little bit. That's obviously optional. I'm just going to hit cancel there. So I'm going to show you one last example of scaling an image up and then scaling an image down using NoHalo versus LoHalo. So come over here to this image again that we started with. And this image is a great example because if I grab my zoom tool and zoom in, we not only have text, but we also have a lot of these artifacts in here. These, of course, were added on purpose. This is an effect that I use within GIMP to create these pixels. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to scale this down, and I'm going to do that to 2 of these images. So I'll scale this one down using the NoHalo effect first. So I'll scale it down to 10% of its original size, and I am just going to change the resolution real quick. So this one I'll use NoHalo as the interpolation, and I'll hit scale. And I'll change the zoom here to 400%. So here's a close-up look of this. And then I'm also going to scale this one down. So go to Image, Scale Image, 10%, 72. And I'll change this one to LoHalo and hit Scale. And then we'll change this to 400%. So if you compare this composition to this one, the only real noticeable difference is in these little artifacts. You can see that these are still a little bit more pixelated, so they're a little bit more prevalent, whereas over in this case, they're a little bit more smoothed. So again, this was the LoHalo effect, and this one was the NoHalo quality interpolation. Everything else though looks almost exactly identical, so that is really the one major difference between these two. It looks like LoHalo just has a little bit more smoothing going on, whereas NoHalo will add a little bit of sharpening at the end there. And I'm going to come over here and scale these two up. So I'll go to Image, Scale Image, and I'm going to scale this one up to 300%, so 3 times the original size. And I'll change this one to NoHalo to start. So it's basically telling me this is going to create a huge image, but that's all right. All right, so that went ahead and scaled our image up. It did take a few seconds to get that done, probably about 10 to 15 seconds there. I'll put the exact timing on the tutorial. But you can see actually everything about this is pretty high quality despite it being 3 times the original size. And I can actually zoom in here all the way. This is 100%. This actually looks really good considering we scaled it up to 3 times its original size. And the text looks pretty good as well. So now let's do the same thing over here. That was with the NoHalo effect. This time we're going to use LoHalo, so I'll go to Image, Scale Image, 300, and I'll hit LoHalo, hit Scale. All right, so that's how I counted, and it was about 35 seconds. I'll compare that to the NoHalo. I'm sure it was probably about the same. I just kind of guessed the time wrong. Again, if you zoom in here, this does look pretty good. So here we're at 100%. So the quality of this is overall really good. The lettering looks pretty good, and the text looks pretty good. So let's see if we can zoom in on the same part of the text here. So this is with NoHalo, and this is with LoHalo. So actually NoHalo looks a little bit more crisp than the LoHalo does. And then if we zoom in on these letters right here, you can see there's sort of pixels spilling off of the numbers here. We'll come down here to the same spot. So the two interpolation qualities look almost identical. I would say NoHalo has crisper edges on the numbers here, whereas the LoHalo effect has a little bit more smoothing going on around the outside of the numbers here. So you could say that either looks less pixelated or more blurry or just has more anti-aliasing on it. So it's really up to your interpretation, and it's up to your preferences as to which one you prefer when you're scaling your images up or down. But I think at the end of the day, if you go with NoHalo or LoHalo as your interpolation quality, you can't really go wrong. So I'll hold Control and zoom out. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/daviesmediadesign. You can also visit our website at daviesmediadesign.com. You can enroll in our GIMP photo editing course from beginner to pro photo retoucher on Udemy. And you can support our channel and help us grow by becoming a patron on Patreon and get some awesome GIMP extras in return. I'll include a link to that as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.